it is a delight to see you all here again. I hope this is as big a joy to you as it is to me. I can't think of anything more significant than to talk to about 3,500 single people about sex. Incredible. All right, we're going to turn the sprinklers on in here in just a little bit. Tell you what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to look at the Song of Solomon in chapter 4, actually. And there's a paragraph just before it that will pick up some speed there. Song of Solomon, chapter 3, verse 6, and we'll go all the way through chapter 4. I want to point out just one thing as we get into the text. You have seen a verse mentioned twice thus far. In their dating relationship, the woman that was so respected and so admired by this man said, "Let his left hand be around my head and his right hand embrace me." She said, "Sustain me with raisin cakes." And this man said, "Don't awaken love until it pleases." And their patience took them last week into the courtship, into the deepest discovery of the little dove coming out of the rock, the commitment to protect their relationship, and it went deeper. And the woman, remember, called her young stag to the hills of Bether. Get the tape if you weren't here. To give her breast completely to this man. And he said, "Don't arouse and don't awaken love until it pleases." That's twice. And now their restraint and their patience and their holiness will take them into the deepest blessing yet. Singles, make a note every time thus far that they restrain themselves in their normal desires, God gives them greater blessing. And now we get the wedding. I just want to show you 6 things about a great wedding. Would you notice in verse 6, the first thing about a great wedding? It borrows the language of the Exodus journey, where God went before Israel in a column of smoke. And it states, what is this coming up from the wilderness like columns of smoke? It pictures the husband as a similitude of God. And if you'll look at the next thing in verse 6, it's a time not just of divinity, but it's a thing that is of sweetness and celebration. He comes perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with the scented powders of the merchants. A wedding is meant to be a celebration. Verse 7, it is a thing of protection and safety. Have you ever gone to a wedding where you silently prayed the entire time for the girl that was about to be subjected to this ogre? Or to this dear fellow that was in some sort of amusement marrying the queen of the harpies, and you knew he was about to get into trouble? Verse 8, look at this. Or verse 7, behold, it is the traveling couch of Solomon. So they're carrying him on a sedan. He is coming to the wedding feast. 60 mighty men around it, the mighty men of Israel, all of them wielders of the sword, expert in war. Each man has his sword at his side, guarding against the terrors of the night. Girls, how would you feel if you came up the aisle and there's about 60 groomsmen, all with 357s? All right? No, you would say, I am safe and secure. This man protects me, and that's the way you're meant to feel. You keep going in verse 10. There is strength. King Solomon made for himself a sedan chair from the timber of Lebanon. Fellows, he is strong. Verse 10, he is splendid. He made its post of silver, its back of gold, its seat of purple fabric, its interior lovingly fitted out by the daughters of Jerusalem. He is rich. This man is a Rolex. He is a Rolls Royce. He is the best thing going. She has not settled for a Pinto of a gentleman. Verse 11, go forth, O daughters of Zion, and gaze on King Solomon, with which his mother has crowned him. He is majestic, and she wants all of the women of the nation to come and look at her husband. And in verse 11 at the end, on the day of his wedding, on the day of the gladness of heart. You girls, you hold out, keep your standards high. Don't you sell out. You stay holy, you stay pure. And there will be a day when the doors will swing open and your mama will stand up and they will look at this man that they have prayed for and look forward to, and your friends will applaud you and be happy. And guys, you will step into the most blessed, wonderful relationship that humans can have this side of heaven if you do it right. But if you compromise, you have committed yourself to something far inferior. And my friend, you will not have just a little bit of hell on this earth. And you may quote me. So this woman has held out and God has blessed her. Isn't that a good wedding? Chapter 4, verse 1, we are at the Sheraton. I'm going to show you 10 different aspects of divine sex. Verse 1 down through verse 4. How beautiful you are, my darling, how beautiful you are. Your eyes are like doves behind your veil. They're in what is called the bridal chamber. Let me get something clear with you. Whenever in that culture you would get married, the guy would go to get his wife in his sedan chair. They would come to the wedding feast. Everybody would come to the party and they would go into a room. And there they would stay as long as they wanted to while everybody was out having a party. And they would consummate their wedding. And then they would come forth. We put the tin cans on the car and send them off. They would go off and consummate their wedding in what was called the bridal chamber. And then they would come out and everybody would go, yay! All right. So, you know. And this is not uncommon in a lot of cultures. The Indians used to do it in a teepee, and everybody would stand around and bang on pots, you know, and stuff like that. Happened to me at my honeymoon, incidentally. Some idiot watched me check in. Always be careful when you check in to a motel, because somebody will see you and at a very inopportune time will whomp on the door. I'll let that go. Chapter 4. She still has on her bridal veil. And he looks through that veil and he says, your eyes are like doves. You are so tender. You are so sweet. You are so gentle. You are so lovely. Your hair is like a flock of goats that's descended from Mount Gilead. I might ought to help you with that, fellas. This fellow looks at her hair. Incidentally, what he has apparently done is this. It's a very sensuous thing. He has taken her veil and laid it back. Perhaps he has undone her hair, and her hair comes down. And it's like goats on Mount Gilead coming down. 2.5 tribes of Israel stayed on the other side of the Jordan because the cattle land was so good. And one of the chief areas was called Gilead. When you talk about the sheep of Gilead, you're talking about blessing indeed. And so he looks at her hair like the blessing of God coming down. And you can just see him lifting her veil, undoing her hair, stroking her hair. Verse 2. Your teeth are like a flock of newly shorn ewes that have just come up from their washing, meaning that they are clean. Women, brush your teeth. Ain't nothing like a funky mouth old woman. You put that veil right back down. Now, what he's doing is he's looking at every little part of her body and saying, you are fantastic. They have just come up from their washing, all of which bear twins, meaning that they are straight. And not one has lost her young, meaning that they are there, what this fellow has done. It's you can just see him here looking at her mouth, at how beautiful her mouth is, and the loveliness of her teeth. In verse 3, your lips are like a scarlet thread. You can just see him tracing with his hands here, ladies, her hair, her lips, at the definitiveness and the you know. Verse 3, your temples are like a slice of pomegranate behind your veil. Now he is looking at the rosiness of her cheeks. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built on rows of stones, which are hung 1,000 shields, all the shields of the mighty men. He has now gone from her lips to her cheeks, right down to her neck. He's moving down her body. Point 1 of sex. You notice that this fellow has not gotten physical. He has spoken to her. The first key to great sex, fellas, is called romance. In verse 5, Your breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle, which feed among the lilies. That is the greatest, most inspired bit of text as to how a man should see his wife. He has talked to her, and now he has undressed her. Her hair is down, her veil is off, and he has taken off the dress of his wife, and he looks at the bareness of that woman's body, and he says, your breasts are like twin fawns of a gazelle. That's perfect. How do you see the sexuality of your wife? How do you approach two fawns, twins of a gazelle? You come up like this. You don't go, hey, fawns, because they're taken up. First of all, marriage is romantic. Sex is romantic. Secondly, sex is gentle. Fellas, write it down. Sex is gentle. I'm going to give you guys some help right here that's going to save you more trouble because you're all inept. You just don't know you're inept. Number one, whenever you have sex with your wife, especially on your honeymoon, you move slow. One of the guys that taught me when I was in college said to me, he said, listen, and he was a pretty hardened kind of a guy that came to the Lord and married this little girl that had never been kissed. And he said he got the idea that in their honeymoon, he could now exercise every fantasy he ever had. And he come out of the bathroom like Conan, all right? And just kind of poured out all of his passion on her. And he said, I scarred her, and it took years of counseling to get her to where she needed to be and me where I needed to be. You move slow on your honeymoon night and anytime. Secondly, big one. There are parameters that you and your mate will share when you make love to your wife. A man's parameters of sexual enjoyment generally will be a lot more erotic than a woman's. How far can a man go? As far as your wife is not demeaned. If she has a problem with something, then you stop. And incidentally, you know what you're going to have to do? And I make couples do this before they get married. I make them talk. And they get to talking about, and the fellow will say, what about this? What about that? And it may surprise him. She'll go, whoa, son, all right. Write it down. There's going to be nights that you know that your wife is doing her duty to love you. There's going to be other nights you think she's been drinking, all right? Trust me. Here's a big one. This is going to save you more trouble. How are you going to have sex when you get married? How are you going to know if your wife's excited? Guys are always excited. How do you know your wife is going to be excited? Oh yeah, Don Meredith, the guy that speaks for Campus Crusade for Christ, couples conferences. He looks, I know one of the great statements on marriage, he looked at the women and he said, you know, you think that all that we guys think about is sex. Yeah, yeah. And that's about the way a guy is. He's always ready. How are you going to know if your wife's ready? What do you do? I mean, do you come home and go, sex, 11 o'clock, 2,100 hours? Do you do that? Or maybe you put out a flag before you come home? Or do you drop hints at dinner? Boy, it was a real exciting day today. How do you let your wife know that you want to have sex? Well, what you do is you got signals, and you pick up signals. For some guys, it's a certain kind of perfume. They may wear a certain cologne. One guy told me, he said, when I put on a certain bathrobe, my wife knows. Tell you what's a great one. The most often used signal for men is late at night. No woman, and a woman is very sensuous. When a man, when he hadn't shaved, when he smells, it hits a woman, all right? And so a guy, if you shave late at night, 10 o'clock, you shave. I use one in big old menthol jobs. Make a little noise. See? Now those are just all things in sex that you got to be sensitive to. For a guy to have good sex, you've got to be cautious and patient and tender. You approach your wife like two fawns, twins of a gazelle. And to a woman, to have good sex, you have to be considerate. And a lot of times, a woman is going to recognize her husband's need. Incidentally, fellas, I'm going to give you a verse your wife can memorize, but you never quote. 1 Corinthians 7. A woman does not have authority over her own body, but the man does. All right? That is your wife's to memorize. That is not yours to quote. And whenever she desires you, and there'll be a lot of times your wife is an act of obedience, will follow through, but there'll be a lot of times she'll say, sweetie, I just really don't feel, and that is quite all right. All right? You just go right to bed. You can chew on the head post if you'd like to, but you just go right to bed. Number 3, watch this. Sex is exhilarating. Look at that in verse 6. Until the cool of the day when the shadows flee away. That's talking about morning time. All night long I will go to the mountain of myrrh and the hill of frankincense. What's the mountain of myrrh, the hill of frankincense? See also the chapter before, the twin hills, the hills of Bether. It's talking about the breast of his wife. And this guy says, all night long I, the stag, am going on my wife in a joyous way until the morning rolls around. The Word of God. Isn't that great? How passionate is that? You let your imagination run because you're meant to. This is why Jewish boys were not to read this book until they were older and down the line, because it is exciting. Verse 7. Something else, fellows, is that sex is scary. That's number 4. Sex is frightening. Look how this fellow speaks to his wife. You are altogether beautiful, my darling. There is no blemish in you. Girls, do you remember in chapter 1 what she said? Don't stare at me because I am swarthy, the sun has burned me. Fellas, let me tell the most painful thing you can do to your wife is on her honeymoon night or at any time when your wife disrobes and you look at her naked body, you say something disparaging and she will never forget it and you will hurt her so deeply. All women tend to be self-conscious about their bodies, and there are some things that they would change. I knew of a couple once that was married, had a number of kids, 3, 4 kids, and had never seen each other naked. Now your question is, how? They would undress, keep the lights out, just get into bed, and they would have sex. And that's a bad deal. No, this man lets her know. And fellas, you're going to marry girls that want to lose some weight, and when they have kids, they're going to get all stretched out. You're going to have some girls that wish this was different and wish that was different. You let her know from the top of your head, right down your body, you are the most lovely woman on the face of this earth. Ladies, do you think you would feel like giving yourself to a fellow that can take your teeth, your hair, your eyes, your cheeks, your neck, your breast, your body, and say, you are absolutely perfect? Of course you'd feel like giving yourself. This guy is a loving man. Incidentally, see also Ephesians 5, how Jesus sees us. He has washed us from every spot or wrinkle to present us holy and blameless before Him. There is no blemish in us. Verse 8, number 5, sex is the means of union and marriage. He says, come away from Lebanon, my bride. Come with me from Lebanon. Journey from the summit of Amana, from the summit of Senir, of Hermon, the den of lions, the mountains of leopards. He's calling her away, and the two are going to become one flesh. In verse 9, sex is sensuous. You have made my heart beat faster, my sister, my bride. You've made my heart beat faster with a single glance of your eyes. That's sight. With a single glance of your necklace. Now watch verse 10. Smell. How beautiful is your love, my sister, my bride. How much better is your love than wine, the fragrance of your oils than kinds of spices. He smells her. Verse 11, he touches her. Your lips, my bride, drip honey. Honey and milk are under your tongue. What kind of kiss is that? That is a French kiss. France did not become a country until the Treaty of Verdun in the 9th century AD. This is 1000 BC. It predates a French kiss by 19 centuries. No, this is a Hebrew kiss. Don't do this until you get married. A lot of people wonder, how far can you go? I'll give you a good, clear answer. Don't ask how far can you go when you're dating. You ask the question, how far can we keep away from it? How close can we walk to the edge of the canyon, Mommy? No, let's stay away from it and just look. But very specifically, you get into trouble when you are in a private place with prolonged kissing. Number one, kissing a person is meant to be frustrating. You are geared in kissing to go to intercourse. That's why God rigs it. When you start doing open mouth kissing, that is as sensuous a thing as you can possibly do. And so you stay out of those two things, and you'll keep yourself out of a lot of trouble. He keeps going. The fragrance of your garments is like the fragrance of Lebanon. Sex is sensuous. Now watch verse 12. Sex is holy. A garden locked is my sister, my bride, a rock garden locked, a spring sealed. A man's sexuality in the book of Proverbs is spoken of as a spring for very obvious reasons. Do not cast your springs into the street. That's what it's called for a man to go into a harlot, to take his sperm and to cast it into the dirt. The woman's sexuality, for obvious reasons, is called a well. A spring goes into a well. It's a classic picture. Fellas, do you notice what this fellow calls his wife prior to their sex act? He says she is a well of fresh water that is sealed. There is a spiritual hymen between this man and this woman. He will not touch her. Fellows, he has kept her a virgin. Marriage is for virgins. Now be encouraged. I know I'm not talking to 4,000 virgins around here. All right, a lot of us have stumbled. The wonderful thing about the Word of God isn't just that it gives you a standard. There's a person who died for the violation of it, and a Holy Spirit who can change your life to conform to it, and a Bible that can illumine your way in it. That's the neat thing about the Bible. It doesn't just take somebody pinned under a weight and tell them they're dumb or tell them to push harder. It helps you change. And so you can be pure and clean from this day on. You may be a person that you're about to get married with somebody and you've been sleeping together for 6 months. I could show you more couples that have had incredible past that turned it around and lived pure from that time on, and God blessed them. They still had to work through some weeds out there, but God blessed them greatly. This man keeps her pure. In verse 13, the garden that they kept the little foxes out of has now come to fruition. It's in bloom. Sexuality has been groomed, and this is maximum sex, as Josh McDowell calls it. Your shoots are an orchard of pomegranates with choice fruits, henna, nard and saffron, calamus, cinnamon, all the trees of frankincense, myrrh, aloes with the finest spices. The idea is, keep the little foxes for us, the foxes that are ruining our vineyard. They looked after them, and now this woman's body has come to maturity. Verse 15, the well is opened. Do you see it, fellas? Look at it. The well is now opened. Her sexuality is now given to him. You are a garden spring, a well of fresh water, and streams flowing from Lebanon. I'm sorry, but I don't take any great metaphysical interpretation of that. I think the interpretation of that is as blatant as you can see. It is the sexuality and the anatomy of that woman. And she is open to this man. In verse 16, sex is responsive. Number 8. She says, now ladies, watch this. What's the phrase this man has said to her twice in the book? Ladies, have you caught it? Do not arouse or awaken love until it pleases. In verse 16, girls, what's the first word she says to her husband? Awake. North wind, strong. Come, wind of the south, gentle. And make my garden breathe. Listen, that's the most erotic verse in the Bible. This is a woman who has been cared for, loved, nurtured on the honeymoon night. He talks to her. He looks at her naked body. He compliments her. He calls her to him. He looks at her. He kisses her. He excites her. And now she invites him into her sexuality. And this woman spreads herself for this man. And she gives herself to him. Good night. I bet there's more Jewish brothers had heart attacks right here. Boom. Clear. Boom. Song of Solomon. Let its spices be wafted abroad. May my beloved come into whose garden? His garden. And eat whose choice fruits? Its choice fruits. I give my garden completely to you. Have at it, you studly guy. Oh, that's sex. Make a note, ladies. This woman is responsive. What is great sex to a man? One thing. Great sex to a man is responsiveness. No man likes to be like a little buzzing bee around the flower of his wife, trying to pollinate her with no response on her part. Now, a lot of guys would love to say that to their wives, but they've never been able to. There's nothing greater to a man than a responsive woman. This woman responds. Ladies, can I tell you something you're never going to hear again, so take good notes? What is excitement to a man? 4 things. Number 1, what he hears. You're kidding. It's what he hears. You remember that on your honeymoon night. No husband will ever say to his wife during sex, shh. Matter of fact, I had a little girl one time, I was getting ready to do her marriage. I walked in, I always shake the guy's hands, talk to him. You know, yeah, here we go. I'll go to the young girl sitting there and I'll pray with her, you know, and talk with her. She's excited. And she looked up at me, and she was a girl in our church. It was like a daughter to me. She looked at me with these big eyes and she said, Tommy, what do I do? I said, well. And I let her know. I said, whatever you feel, you tell him. It's the most exciting thing to a man. You tell him how you feel. And there's going to be a lot of education you have to do with your husband. So first, it's sound. You know what the second thing is? It's what he sees. It's exciting to a man what he sees. Ladies, invest after you get married. Remember this. Invest in negligees. Guys, there is a negligee that women are issued. And it comes from Moose Jaw, Alaska. They all have them. It's made out of seal. It's about that thick. Got these big holes in it, all right? And it was passed down from generations to generation. And it ain't the most exciting thing in the world. And a guy gets excited by what he sees. That's one of the great investments a woman can make, is a nightgown, something nice. A lot of women never know about that. 2 great Christian institutions at shopping malls, Joshua's Books and Victoria's Secret. Trust me. Every man would love to go into Victoria's Secret and buy something, but he's too chicken. And so what we do is we buy gift certificates. You stand outside like a little high school guy buying liquor, you know. Done it myself. And then it's what a man feels. I told this little girl, I said, you got to remember, during sex, your husband is the stabilizing force. Everything on you is free. Your face, your hands, your feet, your knees, everything. A man is so alive during sex, everything that he feels registers on the chart. Love him. Well, we better move on. Chapter 5, verse 1, sex is nourishing. I have come. Now, in chapter 5, verse 1, we're about finished here. Do y'all notice the verb tense change? Look close at the verse. We shifted, didn't we? Past perfect. I have come. It's done. I have come into my garden, my sister, my bride, my myrrh, my balsam, my honeycomb, my honey, my wine, my milk. But did you see what's mentioned 9 times? You're mine, 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 mine. And I am nourished on you. Guys, you know what's the most exciting thing in the world with your wife? Is to have a woman that you love, that you care for, that you're one with, that you romance, that you treat tender. And to where the highest thing you can give her is your body and she gives you yours. And after you love each other, to take this woman and just to hold her on the crook of your arm and to hold her close and to pray and to say, I thank thee, O God, for this woman. And for her to pray and just hold you close and say, Father, thank you for my husband who loves me so tenderly and so sweetly. It doesn't get any better than that. Sex is nourishing. And in your last 2 lines, sex is pleasing to God. This is the only line God speaks in the book. Eat, friends, drink, imbibe deeply, O lovers, meaning it's my gift, go for it. And enjoy it. This is not sex done under an alias in a motel or in a backseat or hiding it from your friends. This is open in the face of God, and God says, enjoy it. That's what sex is meant to be.